The sun hung low over the sprawling ranch, casting long shadows across the golden fields. Silas leaned against the weathered fence, his calloused hands gripping the rough wood, eyes fixed on the wild stallion rearing in the corral. A swift gust of wind carried the scent of grass and dust, stirring memories of his own untamed youth. Lila appeared, a small figure wrapped in a faded blanket, her skin pale against the earth tones surrounding her. She had come to him like a whisper, fragile yet determined. Silas watched as she approached the stallion, her breath steady amidst the chaos. Silas's heart raced, a mix of worry and curiosity. Lila knelt beside the wild horse, her fingers reaching out with a gentleness he had never known. She was a storm in her own right, teaching him that sometimes the quietest souls held the greatest strength. The air was thick with dust and the acrid scent of sweat and sorrow as Lila stood at the edge of the corral, her heart pounding like a wild horse in its final gallop. She squinted against the sun, a harsh spotlight illuminating the figures around her. Her brother's voice echoed in her mind, cruel and biting, urging her out of the car and towards the rugged man waiting by the fence. The rancher's gaze was piercing, a storm brewing in his deep-set eyes that held secrets like the darkened clouds overhead. With each step she took, another piece of her spirit cracked and crumbled beneath the weight of her brother's betrayal. Silas was a man of the land, carved from the rugged contours of the rolling hills that framed his homestead. Years of weathering storms had etched lines into his weather-beaten face, but it was the fatigue in his expression that struck Lila most. He looked at her as if she were an enigma, a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. His calloused hands rested casually on the wooden fence, but there was nothing casual about the way he scrutinized her. Silas felt the weight of her fragility, the shadows clinging to her like a second skin, and wondered what past traumas had led her to this place. The murmurs of the ranch echoed around them, horses whinnying and kicking against their stalls, yet Lila felt ensnared in a stillness that threatened to swallow her whole. She shifted uncomfortably, her ragged dress whispering tales of neglect and sorrow. Silas caught a glimpse of a bruise blooming across her wrist, the evidence of a struggle that wasn't just against the physical pain, but against the very act of being alive. She had been sold, a commodity in someone else's twisted game, and Silas couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow complicit in this transaction, although he hadn't willed it. With a nod, Silas gestured toward the barn where the horses were kept. Lila followed, her heart racing not only from fear, but a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this man would be different from those she had escaped. Yet, as they approached the barn, her thoughts churned with the reality of her circumstances. Everything was new and strange, like the barn's earthy scents mingling with the tang of hay, yet suffocating all the same. The stall doors creaked open, and the stallions inside neighed restlessly, a symphony of wildness that mirrored her own inner turmoil. "Ever been around horses?" Silas asked, attempting to fill the silence, his voice low and gravelly, like the gravel road winding through his ranch. The question was simple, yet laden with expectation. Lila shook her head, feeling the weight of his scrutiny. Silas stared back, an understanding flickering in his eyes that brought no comfort. She was not here to ride. She was here to survive, and the inescapable distance between them made that clear. As days passed, Silas kept her at arm's length, wary of the storm that brewed behind her emerald eyes. She spent her time near the animals, feeling a strange kinship with them, their wildness calling to her bruised soul. The ranch was filled with vigor, yet she remained a ghost wandering through it, always hovering but never truly part of the tapestry. Even as Silas taught her the basics of ranch life, the laughter that bounced between him and the horses echoed around her, leaving her feeling more isolated. Each evening, while she sat on the wooden steps of the barn, her gaze focused on the horizon where the sun melted into the earth, Silas would often drift in and out of view, attending to chores and his resentful thoughts. Lila observed him, her heart both drawn to and repelled by the man who had inherited her brother's unwitting burden. He was rugged and strong, built for the land, yet held an emotional distance that cut deeper than the sharp edges of a stray branch. She was living a reality that felt surreal, trapped between a past she wanted to flee from and a future that loomed uncertain. One afternoon, as the sun tilted low, casting long shadows across the ground, Lila found herself standing at the fence, captivated by the most temperamental stallion on the ranch. There was something electric about the way he moved, powerful yet untamed, as if he embodied every flicker of defiance she had buried deep within her. Silas caught her watching, an eyebrow arching in curious speculation. A knowing glance passed between them, a silent truce of sorts, but the space between them remained, heavy and unyielding. Days turned into weeks, the seasons changing their costumes while Lila remained suspended in a state of waiting. She still felt the ache of betrayal, the gaping wound that pulsed relentlessly at the thought of her brother's betrayal. Silas remained a distant figure, a man wrestling with his own shadows, leaving her alone with the wildness both outside and within. In that secluded ranch, amidst the tumult of unbridled horses and layered sorrows, Lila yearned for freedom, for connection. But in this fragile world, emotional distance felt like the only truth they could agree upon. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the sparse terrain as Lila stepped down from the rickety truck bed. The air was thick with dust and the faint musk of hay, reminiscent of childhood memories she'd long buried. She hesitated for a moment, clutching the worn strap of her duffel bag, eyes scanning the vast expanse of the ranch. The sprawling fields were dotted with rusting farm equipment and grazing cattle, but it was the silence that enveloped her, a heavy, palpable quiet that sank into her bones, that made her heart race. Silas stood just inside the barn, a silhouette against the fading light. With shoulders slumped and the weight of 1,000 yesterdays etched into the lines of his weathered face, he watched her with a mix of wariness and guarded curiosity. The ranch had long been a sanctuary for him, a place where memories of his past danced like specters in the golden glow of sunset. He didn't know what to expect from this girl who had barely whispered a greeting as she arrived, but he sensed, even in those first moments, that she carried burdens of her own. "Welcome," he finally said, his voice gravelly and low, brushing against the stillness that surrounded them. The word hung in the air, almost uncomfortable against the backdrop of their mutual silence. Lila offered a nod, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, acutely aware of his scrutinizing gaze. She pulled her heavy coat tighter around her shoulders, feeling more out of place than ever as an uninvited guest in this vast wilderness. The first days passed like molasses, slow and thick, every moment stretching into an endless loop of hesitant routines. Lila woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the soft rustle of livestock outside her window. She would sit on the edge of her bed, the damp chill of morning seeping through the cracked walls, staring out at the unyielding landscape, struggling to find her footing in a world so foreign. The ache of her illness, hidden beneath layers of bravado, kept her tethered to the warmth of her quilt. Movement felt like a distant memory, one she was unsure she would reclaim. Silas, for his part, was relentless in his tasks. He worked the land with a sense of purpose, hands calloused from years of labor and a heart hardened against the storms of his past. He would glance toward the house where Lila remained, cocooned in her isolation, and a strange sense of helplessness washed over him. He was accustomed to solitude, but her presence stirred something deep within, a flicker of compassion he had long believed extinguished. Yet, it was the horses that drew Lila outdoors. On the third day, she found herself wandering toward the paddock, her feet moving of their own accord. A chaotic cacophony of whinnies and snorts greeted her as she approached the fence, her breath hitching at the sight of the wild stallion, a creature of fury and grace. Silas had warned her of his temperament, but from where she stood, she saw only freedom. The beauty of his untamed spirit resonated within her. She felt tethered to him, as if they were two lost souls adrift in an unyielding world. "Stay back," Silas called, noticing her fascination. His tone firm yet tinged with an underlying tension, as if he feared the wildness in the horse mirrored something within her. Lila didn't heed the warning. She stepped closer, compelled by an invisible thread. The stallion pawed at the earth, muscles rippling beneath his black coat, and in that moment she felt an understanding ignite between them. It was the following day when Lila, fueled by an inexplicable urge, ventured into the paddock. Silas watched from the shadows of the barn, a mixture of concern and curiosity stirring within him. She approached the stallion, slow and deliberate, her heart pounding with every cautious step. The horse paused, nostrils flaring as he gauged her presence, the tension between them crackling like electricity in the air. Lila extended a hand, trembling yet resolute, and for the first time she felt the stirrings of hope against the backdrop of her lingering illness. The moment their eyes locked, a bridge formed, a connection forged in vulnerability and resilience. Silas held his breath as Lila reached out, and the stallion, sensing her unwavering spirit, took a tentative step forward. In that fleeting instant, he recognized in her the strength of survival, the fire of an indomitable will, and perhaps, just perhaps, a shared battle against the wounds that life had carved deep into their souls. The sun pierced through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the worn wooden porch where Silas spent most mornings sipping his coffee. With every sip, he felt the raw tang of the bitter brew mingling with the scent of freshly cut hay drifting from the barn. Lila was already at work, her laughter spilling from between the corral's wooden rails as she coaxed one of the calves into submission. Silas watched from a distance, half hidden by the porch's railings, drawn to her like a moth to the light. It stirred something inside him, a flicker of warmth he had long thought extinguished. Each day followed a similar rhythm. After breakfast, with the sun now high and blazing in the sky, Lila would tend to her chores with an infectious energy that made Silas's heart ache. Dust swirled around her feet as she moved with a grace he had never seen before. She'd fill her arms with hay bales, her laughter rising above the sound of hooves and the creaking barn doors. Silas admired the determination in her small frame, wondering how a girl so sick could possess such spirit. But as he watched her, he felt something deeper, a conflicting mix of admiration and a pang of protectiveness. Their interactions became a delicate dance. Silas would steal glances at Lila while they worked side by side, their voices rising through the air like a harmony only the two of them could understand. She spoke of her dreams, of riding wild horses across open plains, of feeling the surge of freedom beneath her. Silas listened, his heart tightening at the chasm between her dreams and the reality of her ailments. He fought the urge to tell her how reckless those dreams seemed, how they could shatter like glass under the weight of disappointment. But he bit his tongue, for he could sense how important they were to her. Then came the day when Lila first approached Silas's wildest horse, a tempest of muscle and fury named Storm. The beast had been untamed for years, a beast Silas had reluctantly accepted would never be broken. But that day, Lila approached him with a spark in her eye, a determination that startled and intrigued Silas. He watched, heart racing as she stepped into the corral, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were approaching a live wire. The horse snorted, its nostrils flaring, but Lila didn't waver. Silas could hardly breathe as Lila whispered soothing words to Storm, her hands outstretched toward him. The stallion shifted, his muscles tensing and relaxing under her gentle coaxing. Silas's chest tightened. Could she really tame that wild heart? He wanted to grab her and pull her away from danger, to remind her of her frailty, yet he was entranced, caught in the gravitational pull of her bravery. It was beautiful and terrifying, and for the first time, Silas understood that a part of him longed for her to succeed. As days turned into weeks, the ritual continued. Lila formed a bond with Storm that Silas could hardly comprehend. She would return each afternoon, carefully approaching the horse, spending hours grooming him, whispering and coaxing him into calmness. It was in those moments Silas felt a strange envy wash over him, a longing for the connection Lila had with something he could never hope to unravel. He stood at the fence, fists clenched, battling emotions that bubbled just beneath the surface. He had never wanted to share his heart, but Lila entered it like a storm. In the quiet evenings, after the sun dipped below the horizon, Silas and Lila would sit on the porch, an unspoken tension hanging between them. The air felt thick with unexpressed emotions, a chasm widened by circumstances they couldn't name. Lila would recount tales of her childhood, of wild escapades and dreams unmet, while Silas remained quiet, weighed down by secrets he felt unworthy to share. His voice caught in his throat as he struggled to articulate the growing admiration he felt for her strength and the fear that gripped him each time he thought of her health wavering. One evening, as the crickets chirped their nightly serenade, Silas finally found the courage to speak. "You know, Lila, riding Storm is a dream that could hurt you. He's not like any other horse." Her blue eyes locked onto his, a spark of defiance and determination igniting within them. "I'm not afraid of a little danger," she replied, her voice firm yet soft. "Every time I'm with him, I feel alive." "Isn't that worth the risk?" Silas felt the weight of her gaze, and for a moment the world around them faded into a quiet hum. He saw the longing in her spirit and the fire in her heart, and the truth hit him like a lightning bolt. Lila was never just a girl who had been brought in from the storm. She was the storm, wild and free, determined to carve her own path. Silas swallowed hard, knowing he couldn't keep her from reaching for the stars, even if it meant standing back and watching her chase a piece of his own shattered dreams. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden hues across the paddock where Lila stood, her fingers brushing the wild mane of the stallion. Silas watched from a distance, the barn door creaking softly behind him. The air was thick with expectation and the scent of hay, mingling with the heady musk of the horse, sending shivers of anxiety and wonder racing through him. Lila had been a tempest in his quiet world, bringing a flurry of chaos and unexpected tenderness that he hadn't anticipated. "What are you doing?" he called, trying to mask the concern in his voice, though it trembled slightly as the words left him. The stallion, aptly named Storm, was notorious for throwing off anyone who dared approach him too quickly. Lila turned, a quick smile lighting her face, but it vanished as she caught the worry etched in Silas's expression. "I'm just trying to understand him," she replied, her voice steady but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "He's angry, and I think he can sense my fear." The remnants of her illness still clung to her, but her determination to connect with the horse was palpable. Silas wanted to urge her to step back, to prioritize her own well-being over the whims of a creature who had long been untamed. Instead, he remained rooted, the tension between them thickening the air. "I'm not sure you should be doing this," he said after a moment, unable to suppress the protectiveness that surged within him. The look Lila gave him felt like an arrow, sharp and unexpected. It pierced through the air, separating them, revealing a vulnerability he had only glimpsed before. She took a step back, as if his words had pushed her away, and Silas felt a familiar pang of regret ripple through him. "Why are you always so worried?" Lila's brow furrowed, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I'm not as fragile as you think." The challenge hung between them like the heavy silence of the approaching storm. Silas wanted to reach out, to convey understanding, but the fear rooted deep within him kept his feet planted firmly in place. He could see her spirit flaring, embers of defiance lighting her eyes, and it terrified him to think of her getting hurt. "Sometimes fragile things can break the hardest," Silas replied, his voice softer now, almost a whisper, as he stepped forward. He felt the weight of his own experiences pulling him back, memories of the ranch's past, of losses that shaped his cautious nature. But that was his battle, his burden, and Lila had her own. "You don't need to prove anything to me," he added, a weak attempt to bridge the growing chasm. But Lila stood firm, her resolve simmering beneath the surface. "Maybe I do. Maybe I need to show you that I'm strong enough to tame my own demons, just like I'm trying to do with Storm." The stallion snorted, pawing the ground as if echoing the turmoil swirling between them. Silas glanced at the wild creature, then back at Lila, realizing that the two were not so different. Both were fighting battles invisible to the naked eye. "Lila," he breathed, desperation creeping in, a plea to see her. "You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here, but I can't watch you risk everything." Her gaze softened momentarily, the storm in her eyes flickering like candlelight. Yet the tension was far from resolved, the misunderstanding deepening like the shadows creeping across the barn. Lila turned back towards the horse, her determination hardening as she faced Storm once more. With a deep breath, she approached the stallion, extending her palm slowly, inviting trust. Silas felt his heart constrict, watching her, the dance between danger and bravery spiraling out of control. "Sometimes you just need to take a chance, Silas," Lila said softly, her voice lingering in the air, resonating with both hope and pain. Silas wished he could lend her some of his strength, but all he had was a heart laid bare, heavy with the weight of unspoken fears. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue over the ranch. Lila leaned against the fence, her fingers tracing the rough wood, eyes locked on Silas as he readied Thunder for the evening ride. The horse snorted impatiently, wild energy radiating from its powerful frame. Silas, focused and determined, moved with a grace that made the rugged landscape feel alive, intertwining with the rhythm of the earth and sky. Lila's heart raced, captivated by the sight. She hadn't known such beauty existed, and yet here it was, unfurling before her like the petals of a morning bloom. It wasn't just his skill with the horse that drew her in. It was the way he took every moment seriously, yet allowed his gentle smile to break the seriousness. Silas had shown her nothing but kindness since she'd arrived. Those tender moments when he checked on her fever, or the quiet laughter they shared over a shared meal. Lila's ribcage tightened at the thought, a flicker of something awakening within her, a connection that felt as tenuous as the wildflowers bending in the wind. "Are you going to just stand there?" Silas's voice called, breaking through her reverie, a playful challenge lacing his tone. "Or are you going to help me get this beast ready?" He grinned, and Lila felt a warmth spread through her cheeks. There was something about the way he included her, as if she belonged here, that made her feel a flicker of strength beneath the weariness that clung to her. With a hesitant smile, Lila stepped forward, heart pounding. She approached Thunder, who eyed her suspiciously, flicking its ears back. "Hey, big guy," she murmured, extending a hand. "I'm just here to help." With Silas's watchful gaze on her, she felt emboldened. Thunder shifted uneasily, but didn't bolt, a silent testament to the trust Silas had built between man and beast, and now possibly woman and horse. "Hold him steady," Silas instructed, moving to her side. Their shoulders brushed as he leaned down to grab the saddle. Lila's breath hitched, the contact igniting a flicker of electricity that spread through her. There was a world of unspoken words in the way he looked at her, his eyes softening as he worked. In that moment, Lila wasn't just a girl recovering from illness. She was someone capable of strength and bravery. They worked in tandem, an unspoken rhythm echoing through the air. Lila felt her confidence swell as she gently stroked Thunder's neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath the sleek coat. "You're a good boy, aren't you?" she whispered, and Silas's gaze flickered toward her, a smile teasing at the corners of his mouth. It was a small gesture but significant, a fleeting connection that spoke volumes amidst the cacophony of hooves and the rustling grasses. As they finished preparing Thunder, Lila's gaze shifted to Silas. He caught her eye, and for a moment the noise of the ranch faded into silence. There was a depth in his expression, a vulnerability that startled her. "You know," he began, his voice low. "Most people wouldn't approach thunder like that, especially not after he threw me last summer." He chuckled, but there was an edge to his laughter, a hint of the pain he carried. Lila's heart twisted at his confession, and without thinking, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his forearm. "Maybe he knows you and trusts you," she replied softly, feeling a surge of empathy for the man who had welcomed her into his world. Silas turned to her fully, the weight of her words settling between them like a fragile thread, shimmering with possibility. In that moment, Lila understood that they were both healing, two souls navigating the wreckage of their pasts, searching for connection. Silas's hand enveloped hers, his thumb brushing over her knuckles with a tenderness that sent shivers down her spine. The wildness of thunder faded into the background, a mere whisper against the burgeoning awareness that pulsed between them. As twilight descended, the ranch transformed into a canvas of shadows and whispers. Lila felt the fragile bond grow stronger, and for the first time since her arrival, she believed that she could tame not just the wildness of the animals, but the wildness within herself, all with Silas standing by her side, a silent partner in the dance of healing. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch. Silas stood at the corral gate, his calloused hands resting against the wood, watching Lila as she maneuvered through the dust with a hesitant grace. Each step she took sent a flurry of memories crashing through him, her laughter echoing in the barn, the quiet nights spent with only the hoot of an owl to fill the silence. But now, a cloud hung heavy between them, a silence that felt thicker than the air itself. Layla's eyes flickered toward him, a mixture of yearning and fear swirling deep within their depths. Lila's heart raced, caught in a tumult of emotions that clenched at her throat. She stood by the wild horse, its sleek coat shimmering in the fading light. She could feel the tension in its muscles, its spirit unbroken yet yearning for connection. A week ago, she had been too weak to even walk, too lost in her own fears to venture outside. But now, with each moment spent around the beast, she felt something shifting within her. The urge to speak clawed at her, but the weight of her silence dragged her back. She swallowed hard, yearning to bridge the chasm that had formed between her and Silas. The horse let out a low whinny, snapping her from her reverie. She stepped closer, sensing its unease reflecting her own. The wildness that had once terrified her now thrilled her. It was a mirror of the battle raging inside. She reached out slowly, fingers brushing against its neck. The horse flinched but did not retreat, and in that moment, Lila felt a flicker of resolve spark within her. If she could tame this wild creature, perhaps she could find her own voice again. Silas watched, his breath catching in his chest. Each motion Lila made seemed to echo in the vastness of the ranch. She was a fragile whisper in a world of roars, yet here she stood, towing the line of courage. He could see it in the tilt of her chin, the determination lighting her features. But behind that bravery lay shadows, deep and unfathomable. He remembered the way she had flinched at his questions, the way her silence had filled the spaces between them like a ghost. Lila took another step closer to the horse, her heart pounding in her ears. The wind rustled the grass, whispering secrets she longed to share. Did Silas want to hear her? Would he still look at her like he did before? The silence between them screamed like a tempest, and she could almost feel the walls closing in. She needed to break through, to say something, anything, but the words felt lodged in her throat as if they were tangled in the same wildness she sought to tame. The horse shifted beneath her touch, trusting her even when she felt unworthy. That trust ignited a fire within her. With every stroke, she found herself whispering promises. "I'll be strong. I'll find my place." Each word was a step toward a truth she'd buried deep. Her voice trembled, breaking the stillness that lingered. It was soft at first, barely a murmur, but it was enough. The sound felt foreign yet exhilarating, as if she were shedding layers of uncertainty like old skin. Silas leaned against the fence, an unspoken question resting in his gaze. He wanted to reach out, to help her find her voice, but he wasn't sure how. He felt her spirit rising as she worked with the horse, the wild creature becoming a dance partner in the choreography of her courage. Lila was struggling against her own fears, and for the first time he saw a glimmer of the girl who had arrived at the ranch, fierce, beautiful, and untamed. The sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple as Lila finally turned to him, a breath caught between them. "I've been afraid," she said, and the world seemed to still. Afraid to speak, afraid to ride. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but a smile broke through, fragile yet triumphant. "But I want to try." The admission hung in the air, a soft yet powerful declaration that echoed against the backdrop of the ranch. Silas felt the weight of her words settle around them, a fragile bridge spanning the divide they had once stood on. He stepped forward, the silence no longer a barrier but a canvas for their shared journey. "I'm here, Lila. We'll learn together." The promise hung in the air, wrapped in the warmth of the dying sun, as two souls began to weave their stories anew, bound by the wildness within and the courage to embrace it. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden light across the ranch. Silas stood at the edge of the corral, arms crossed, his rugged form silhouetted against the fiery sky. He watched, a mixture of awe and disbelief churning inside him as Lila faced off against his wildest horse. The animal, a tempest of muscle and spirit, poured at the ground, snorting clouds of dust into the air. But Lila, fragile yet resolute, stood unflinching, her eyes locked on the beast. The world seemed to hold its breath. Silas had never seen anything like it. He felt a bond forming between them, something deeper than mere admiration. This girl, too sick to ride just weeks ago, now commanded the very essence of a creature that had defied him at every turn. Tempted to call out, to offer her guidance, he hesitated. Instead, he leaned against the fence, his heart heavy with both pride and fear, noticing how she drew in a breath, steadying herself like the calm before a storm. With each passing moment, a palpable tension enveloped the corral. The horse danced, its dark coat gleaming in the slanting sunlight, muscles rippling under skin as it assessed this new player in its field. Lila's fingers grazed the air, a gentle invitation, but the horse reared its head defiantly, as if to say that no human could tame it. But Lila was not deterred. There was a strength in her struggle, an unyielding light that cut through the shadows of her past. Silas felt the pull of her determination, rooting him to the spot. Memories surged unbidden, reminding him of his own battles, the ones that had worn him down, until he felt only echoes of his former self. It dawned on him that Lila, despite her frailty, was fighting not just for the horse, but for herself. A reclamation of worth in a world that had sidelined her. He had thought he was the savior in her story, yet here she stood, unraveling the threads of his own unraveling life. The air crackled with energy as Lila took a step closer, her voice soft but fierce. "Come on," she urged, her words almost a whisper, yet they carried the weight of hope. Silas felt a shiver run down his spine as he watched her hand reach out, brushing against the horse's trembling facade. In that moment, time froze. The world around them dimmed, and all that existed was the connection sparking between girl and horse, a dance of understanding that transcended the barriers of speech, pain, and fear. As Lila breathed in sync with the horse, Silas clutched the wooden fence, his heart hammering. He couldn't look away as the beast, once so wild and untamable, began to lower its guard. Silas marveled at the sight, his heart swelling with a mix of admiration and longing. He realized he had been mistaken to believe that his role was that of the caretaker. Lila was not merely surviving, she was reclaiming her spirit, and in doing so, inviting him to do the same. Then in a moment so raw it felt almost sacred, Lila took another step forward, The wild horse, emboldened by her presence, lowered its head, nostrils flaring as it inhaled her essence. The air crackled, thick with emotions neither of them dared voice. Silas felt a lump rising in his throat as he witnessed the unbreakable bond between them forming, a testament to the resilience of both the girl and the beast. And yet in the recesses of his soul, he yearned for Lila to acknowledge him, to trust him. Silas, she finally breathed out, the name weaving through the air like a thread of silk. The word hung between them, electric and fragile, and Silas felt the ground shift beneath him. It was not just a whisper, it was a declaration of understanding, a bridge across the chasm that had separated them. In that instant, he was no longer just the veteran rancher, and she just the sick girl. They were two souls intertwined, both healed in the most profound way, the ability to believe in each other. With that single utterance, the wild horse stepped into her space, its breath warm against her cheek. Lila's smile bloomed, radiant and fierce, illuminating the path ahead. As Silas took a step closer, ready to join her in this newfound synergy, he realized that it was Lila who had tamed not just the horse, but his own wounded heart. Together, they stood on the threshold of new beginnings, united in unspoken promises as the sun sank beneath the horizon, sealing their bond with the promise of dawn. In the golden hush of twilight, the ranch lay wrapped in the warmth of fading light. Silas stood by the corral, the air thick with the scent of grass and dust, watching Lila. She was a whisper against the wild, her frail figure anchored by determination as she approached the stallion, his coat glistening like obsidian under the last rays of sun. With a gentle touch, she reached out, fingers brushing the horse's mane, her heart a silent drum, echoing the rhythm of trust forged in shared battles. Silas felt the years of solitude and sorrow dissolve in the quiet of the moment, replaced by the fragile pulse of hope. As Lila leaned into the beast, the wildness inside it softened, mirroring the wildness in her spirit, tamed not by force, but by understanding. Silas took a breath, inhaling the intertwining essence of human and beast, and stepped forward, his shadow falling alongside hers. The world around them faded, leaves rustling like secrets shared between friends. With a swift glance, Lila caught his eye. A smile flickered across her lips, a silent promise of healing and connection. Together, they stood in the golden dusk, two souls entwined, finding home where once there was only longing.